Before you listen to anything else, answer this honestly. How many names have you already forgotten? How many lives were taken, briefly mentioned, and replaced by the next headline before you ever had time to feel them? Because forgetting is how this keeps happening. This moment is for Renee Nicole Good, a woman whose life should never have ended the way it did. A woman who should still be waking up to ordinary mornings that felt unimportant only because they were guaranteed. She should still be annoyed by small inconveniences, laughing at things that wouldn't matter tomorrow, putting off plans because she believed she had time. Her name should belong to the future, not to memory. And the fact that it doesn't should disturb all of us. This moment is for Renee Nicole Good, a woman whose life should never have ended the way it did. A woman who should still be waking up to mornings that feel ordinary only because they are still hers. She should still be moving through days filled with small frustrations, brief pleasures, and passing worries. The kinds of things that feel insignificant until they are suddenly gone forever. She should still be making plans she hasn't kept yet, still postponing dreams she believes she has time for, still laughing at things that won't matter tomorrow because tomorrow was supposed to exist. Her name should still belong to the future, not be spoken in remembrance, not carried with sorrow, not repeated as a symbol of loss. Her life should never be reduced to a reference point, a headline, or an example. And yet, her death now forces itself into our collective conscience, demanding that we stop looking away. Because her death is not just an isolated tragedy. It is not a random act that can be dismissed as rare or unfortunate. It is not something we can explain away in order to preserve the illusion that the world around us is stable and fair. It is a rupture, a violent tear in the story we tell ourselves about safety, progress, and normalcy. It exposes something profoundly broken beneath the surface of a society that insists it is functioning, while so many lives are being lost, dismissed, or forgotten. When a life is taken this senselessly, it doesn't just end one future. It calls into question the values that claim to protect all futures. It forces us to confront truths we have been avoiding for a very long time. Truths that are uncomfortable precisely because they reveal how conditional safety has become and how unevenly dignity is distributed. And while families are grieving, while loved ones are left trying to make sense of a world that no longer feels familiar, while communities are shaken and left with questions that have no answers, fear settles quietly into the background of everyday life. It does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it hums softly beneath routines. It lives in the hesitation before leaving the house, in the pause before turning on the news, in the silence after a siren fades into the distance. It lingers in conversations that trail off, in glances exchanged without words, in the growing sense that something fundamental has shifted. And in the midst of all this, while grief is raw and fear is real, we are being lied to. Not accidentally, not casually, but deliberately, methodically, and with complete confidence. We watch leaders stand behind podiums, surrounded by symbols of authority, speaking in calm, practiced tones. They offer reassurance with polished smiles. They tell us everything is under control. They insist that nothing is wrong. They suggest that what we are witnessing with our own eyes, what we are hearing with our own ears, what we are feeling in our own bodies is exaggerated, misunderstood, or entirely imagined. They speak with such certainty that the responsibility subtly shifts onto the public, to prove that our fear is justified, that our concern is rational, that our reality is real. And that is dangerous. Because when people are trained to doubt their own perception of truth, power no longer needs force to maintain itself. Confusion becomes a weapon. We are told to calm down, to be patient, to trust the process. We are told that those in power know more than we do, that they see a larger picture we are not entitled to question. We are told that doubt is disruptive, that criticism is divisive, that asking questions undermines unity, especially the uncomfortable questions, especially the ones that reveal contradictions, especially the ones that demand accountability. Silence, we are told, is responsibility. Obedience is framed as stability. And all of this is happening while many believe we are entangled in an illegal war with Venezuela, a conflict initiated without transparency, without public consent, and without meaningful oversight. Decisions with irreversible consequences are made behind closed doors, while the people expected to live with those consequences are asked not to look too closely. At the same time, we are hearing something that should alarm anyone who believes in justice, fairness, or shared responsibility, that international law doesn't matter, that global standards are optional, that rules exist only when they serve power, That accountability flows downward but never up. That some lives are protected by law while others are exposed to its absence. And when laws become selective, when principles become conditional, the only thing left holding everything together is the personal morality of those in power. Not institutions, not systems, not shared values, just individual character, unchecked, unrestrained, and unanswerable. That is not stability. That is not leadership. That is not safety. That is a gamble with human lives. And that should frighten us all, because once truth becomes flexible, once law becomes optional, once accountability disappears, there is nothing left to prevent the next name from being spoken in remembrance instead of expectation. There is nothing left to protect the future from becoming another list of losses we were told to accept. But morality is not a slogan. It is not a phrase you repeat until it loses its meaning, and it is not something you announce about yourself and expect others to accept on faith. Morality is not proven through confidence or volume, and it cannot be manufactured through speeches, press releases, or carefully staged appearances. Real morality reveals itself quietly over time through restraint, through consistency, through accountability, especially in moments when power could be abused and chooses not to be. It shows itself in how leaders treat those with less power, how they respond to criticism, and how they behave when consequences are inconvenient. And if the future of the most powerful nation on earth is meant to rest on the morality of a man the public widely associates with criminal convictions, abuse allegations, and a long, documented history of cruelty, then we are not being led towards safety or stability. We are not being guided with care. We are being dragged, slowly, forcefully, towards something darker and more dangerous. Because when leaders abandon truth, they do not simply weaken institutions, they hollow them out. They strip them of their purpose while leaving the outer structure intact, creating the illusion that everything still works. Laws remain written, courts remain standing, offices remain occupied, but the spirit that once animated them is gone. Systems designed to protect the public are repurposed to manage, intimidate, and control it. Accountability becomes selective. Justice becomes conditional. Power begins to excuse everything, and responsibility disappears the higher up you go. Over time, people are taught, subtly, relentlessly, that the rules are real only for those without influence, and that consequences are something to be feared only by the powerless. So this moment is for Renee, but it is also for the millions of people across the United States who woke up today with fear quietly pressing against their chest. Not the kind of fear that always announces itself loudly, but the kind that settles into daily life and refuses to leave. Fear of their government, of what it might do or what it might fail to do. Fear of their neighbors, of how quickly suspicion and anger have replaced trust. Fear of the next breaking alert lighting up their phone, the next siren cutting through the night, the next story that confirms what they already feel but don't want to say out loud. A fear that asks whether safety is still guaranteed, whether justice still applies evenly, whether tomorrow will look anything like yesterday. I know that fear because I feel it too. I love this country. I love the promise it was built on. I love the idea of it, the belief that freedom is more than a word, that dignity is not conditional, that equality and justice are not privileges reserved for a few. These were not meant to be slogans or decorations. They were meant to be principles that shaped real lives. But what we are witnessing right now, this cruelty, this chaos, this casual disregard for human life, does not reflect those ideals. It does not resemble the future we were told we were inheriting. It feels like something else entirely, something colder and more fractured, something we were never meant to accept as normal. And yet here we are, dressed in elegance, bathed in light, celebrating ourselves, applauding achievements, handing out trophies, acting as though art exists in a vacuum untouched by the world outside these walls, as though creativity can be separated from reality, as though suffering can be paused for the duration of a ceremony. The irony is overwhelming. If there were an award for editing reality, it would go to the institutions that have perfected the art of rearranging facts, cutting away inconvenient truths, and presenting a carefully polished version of events that resembles justice just enough to feel legitimate. It is an editing process that smooths rough edges, removes accountability, and replaces complexity with comfort. And if there were an award for turning journalism into performance, where outrage is carefully rationed, silence is strategic, and scrutiny is applied only when it is safe, it would go to the outlets that package distortion as information and spectacle as truth. Because when truth becomes uncomfortable, it gets trimmed. When facts threaten power, they quietly disappear. When reality doesn't serve the narrative, it is rewritten again and again until people no longer recognize what has been lost. And over time, that loss becomes normalized, leaving us applauding in rooms like this while the world outside grows increasingly unrecognizable. We've seen artists wear pins, symbols, and slogans, small, visible gestures meant to signal awareness, solidarity, or concern. They are attempts, however imperfect, to acknowledge that something beyond this room matters, that the world outside these walls is demanding to be seen. And every time people ask whether that kind of activism actually helps. Whether it reaches anyone, whether it changes anything, whether it's sincere or simply symbolic. But before we even try to answer that question, we have to be honest about what this night really is. This is show business. This is spectacle. This is carefully choreographed glamour, rehearsed spontaneity, applause on cue. This is distraction by design. This is a few polished hours where we collectively agree, explicitly or not to look too closely at what's happening outside. We dim the lights on reality just long enough to feel comfortable celebrating ourselves. We suspend grief. We postpone fear. We tell ourselves there will be time to deal with it later. And in doing so, we participate in the illusion that art can exist untouched by the world that shapes it. What happened to Renee was horrific. There is no softer word for it. It never should have happened. It should not be normalized, rationalized, or folded quietly into the background noise of constant tragedy. And if those in power had chosen responsibility over intimidation, restraint over force, care over dominance, maybe it wouldn't have happened at all. Maybe a life would not have been cut short. Maybe a future would not have been erased. But real conscience does not come from symbols. It doesn't come from pins, slogans, or gestures that can be removed at the end of the night. Conscience comes from choices, especially the ones that cost something. It comes from courage, from accountability, from refusing to accept that fear, violence, and injustice are simply the price we have to pay for stability, from rejecting the idea that this is just how things are now and nothing can be done. It's surprising that I'm even standing here tonight, because I've been boycotting this ceremony for nearly a decade. A quiet boycott, so silent that no one seemed to notice it was happening at all. It began over something trivial, something that feels almost absurd when placed next to everything that has followed. The kind of grievance that seems important in the moment and meaningless in hindsight. But time has a way of clarifying things. It strips away what doesn't matter and sharpens what does. Perspective changes when the world changes. And the world has changed, dramatically, repeatedly, and often painfully. Since then, we've lived through a global pandemic that exposed just how fragile our systems really are. We watched institutions fail in real time, not quietly, not gradually, but visibly and publicly. We saw who was protected and who was not. We saw how quickly responsibility was deflected and how easily suffering was accepted as unavoidable. We've seen lies repeated so often with such confidence that they begin to sound like truth. We've watched empathy dismissed as weakness, compassion mocked as naivety, and cruelty reframed as strength and decisiveness. And some days, it feels as though democracy itself has become optional, as if it's something we reference with nostalgia, something we talk about in the past tense, rather than something we actively practice and defend. Normally, moments like this are supposed to be light. They are designed to feel effortless and celebratory. We're meant to smile, read names, applaud politely, and move on. We're meant to play our part in the ritual and pretend that the world outside doesn't exist, that it can wait patiently until the ceremony is over. But I can't do that tonight. I don't feel okay. A woman was murdered today. Armed forces that resemble occupying soldiers more than protectors are moving through American streets. And that reality does not disappear just because the lights are bright and the room is full. And as much as I love art, as much as I believe in storytelling, imagination, and the power of shared human experience, I cannot stand here and pretend that none of this is happening. I cannot pretend that creativity is separate from consequence or that celebration is harmless W. And it requires silence. I cannot pretend that applause is enough to drown out grief or that spectacle can replace responsibility. Because the world does not stop at the edge of this stage, and neither should our conscience. We have leadership openly suggesting, sometimes subtly, sometimes without any shame at all, that laws do not apply to them. Not domestic laws, not international laws, not the rules that are supposed to exist precisely to prevent power from becoming dangerous. We are told to trust their morality, to believe that personal character can replace accountability, even as millions of Americans look at the very same figures and see none. We see behavior that contradicts the words. We hear promises that collapse under scrutiny. And while this debate about power and morality plays out at the top, Ordinary people are suffering in ways that are both quiet and devastating. That suffering doesn't always make headlines, but it shapes lives every single day. And that, far more than any political argument, is the real emergency. People can't pay their rent, not because they're irresponsible, but because the cost of survival has outpaced the value of work. They can't afford groceries without sacrificing something else. Healthcare feels less like a right and more like a gamble, a luxury reserved for those lucky enough to have access. Education, once framed as a pathway forward, is collapsing under neglect, underfunding, and indifference. Families are breaking under pressures that no one should be expected to endure alone, forced to make impossible choices between health, stability, and survival. And none of this makes us safer. It doesn't bring peace. It doesn't create order. It drains people. It exhausts them. It leaves them afraid, isolated, and desperate. If this chaos truly helped working people, if it created dignity, stability, or real opportunity, then maybe it could be defended. If it lifted families instead of crushing them, if it made communities stronger instead of more fractured, perhaps there would be something to justify it. But it does. Americans are dying, not abstractly, not hypothetically. They are being shot in their cars, killed in their homes, removed from the future in an instant, leaving behind families who will never be the same. So the question is, what's wrong? We already know what's wrong. The question is what we are willing to tolerate, what we are being asked to accept as normal, and how long we are willing to live that way. Most Americans want the same simple things. They want safety, not just from violence, but from uncertainty. They want stability, a life that doesn't feel like it could collapse at any moment. They want to know their children will be okay, not just tomorrow, but years from now. They want to work hard and survive without fear, without feeling like one illness, one bill, or one crisis will destroy everything they've built. But our government increasingly answers not to people, but to corporations. And while wealth concentrates at the top, the rest of us are encouraged, subtly and constantly, to fight each other. Because divided people don't demand justice, distracted people don't organize, exhausted people don't resist. The solution is not complicated, it is not radical, it is not unrealistic. Fight for working people, protect their dignity, put their lives first. Build systems that serve the many instead of the few. Everything else, stability, safety, trust, follows from that. And Hollywood, despite what some want to believe, despite the convenient myths told about it, is built by outsiders. It always has been. From its very beginning, it has been shaped by immigrants, by dreamers, by people who arrived from somewhere else carrying stories they were never allowed to tell where they came from. People who crossed borders not only of geography, but of class, language, culture, and expectation. People who were told they didn't belong and came anyway. They brought with them memories, traditions, pain, humor, contradictions, and hope. And those differences did not weaken the culture, they created it. They gave it texture. They gave it depth, they gave it life. Remove those people and you don't protect culture, you erase it. You flatten it into something hollow and repetitive. You drain it of curiosity and risk. You turn it into something safe, predictable, and ultimately meaningless. Kick them all out and what remains is not art, it's noise. It's spectacle without substance. It's repetition without imagination. Because art only exists when we allow humanity to be complex, uncomfortable, imperfect, and shared. Art lives in contradiction. It lives in stories that challenge us, unsettle us, and force us to see the world from a perspective that isn't our own. Without that, culture doesn't survive, it stagnates. At its core, an actor's job is simple, even if the work itself is difficult. It is to build empathy, to step into lives that are different from our own and make them feel our. Feel close and human, to collapse distance, to turn strangers into people we recognize, to remind us that someone else's pain, fear, joy, or hope is not abstract, it is lived, it is felt. And when that work is done honestly, it has the power to soften us, to open us, to make us less afraid of one another. And yet there was one performance, not on a screen, not in a film, not safely contained within fiction, but in real life that did the opposite of that work. It did not build empathy, it dismantled it. It did not invite understanding. It mocked vulnerability. It humiliated someone weaker. It turned cruelty into entertainment. And because it came from a position of power, it did not remain an isolated moment. It didn't fade, it echoed. Because cruelty spreads when it is modeled from the top. Disrespect multiplies when it is rewarded or excused. Violence grows when humiliation is normalized and laughed at. When the powerful bully the powerless, the harm does not stop with the target. It seeps into the culture, teaching others that domination is acceptable, that empathy is optional, that kindness is weakness. And in that kind of environment, everyone loses whether they realize it yet or not. Which brings us inevitably to the press. because none of this can be confronted, challenged, or changed without truth. We need journalism with courage, not convenience. Journalism that confronts power instead of flattering it. Journalism that asks uncomfortable questions and refuses easy answers. Journalism that does not trade integrity for access or truth for comfort. Journalism that protects reality instead of polishing lies until they feel safe enough to consume. That is why a free press exists in the first place. Not to entertain us, not to reassure us, but to hold power to account, especially when doing so is unpopular, risky, or dangerous. And that is why it must be defended, not symbolically, not rhetorically, not someday in the abstract, but now. In real time, in real ways, because we are going to need journalists in the days ahead, people willing to stand in uncomfortable places to ask questions others are afraid to ask, to document what those in power would rather keep hidden. And they are going to need us to stand with them, to support them, to protect their right to do their work without intimidation, violence, or silence. Because without truth, there is no accountability. And without accountability, there is no justice. And without justice, there is no freedom left to save. If this made you uncomfortable, that's not an accident. If this made you angry, don't let it fade. Share this. Talk about it. Leave a comment and say what you're seeing where you live. Because silence is what power depends on, and attention is where change begins.